last session has the name Kevin next to it, and Kevin Martin and I got confused. We both thought we were doing this, so we decided we'll just do it together. So come on up, Kev. And that's not true. I'm just making that up. So Funky Kevin's up here. He hopefully will not be dancing as in previous years.
No, I won't.
So what we wanted to leave you with is 10 takeaways and actions to take now in the future of work. You've heard a lot about different aspects of work and the future of work going forward. We have pulled in some of those aspects into this presentation, but also taken some of the research, some of which you haven't seen yet, around the future of work. And so I'm going to let Kevin kick this off as we think about where we're going. That really cool, graphic here on like where things are going and how fast things are moving.
Right.
But I'll let you kick it off.
I think what we're trying to represent here is the theme of the conference, right? It's about the disruption of work, and what all of us are experiencing every day, obviously, is disruption. And what's unique about this generation right now is it's happening from multiple areas, right, all the time. And there's no sense of it stopping. And so, next slide, Kevin. What we think is really important, and it was alluded to by several of the speakers of the last few days, which is, whenever there's, transformation, let's call it transformation right now, it's continuous, right? It's not a change event anymore. And the intersection of these 5 areas, which happens to be the 5 areas our research is based around, is something that we think is quintessentially important for all of you to be able to continually keep in mind to help the organization in its continuous ability to manage the disruption. And so the basic way to look at this is, let's just assume a disrupted event in the marketplace, which more than likely will require a shift in corporate strategy, right? And when there's a shift in strategy, you've got to look then and say, what within our culture needs, supports that strategy? What is not going to? Where are the strengths versus the stretches per 3M, right? And then based on that, what are the 1 or 2 leadership behaviors that are going to change? Which ones are supportive of that? Which ones are not right now? How do we need to change that? And then what do we need to look at through a talent lens as well? And you'll see, if you follow that narrative, if that makes sense to you, you'll see how the rest of this flows.
And for those of you who aren't aware, this is a graphic that we created several years ago. It's the 5 dimensions of high performance. And our organization is really organized around these 5 dimensions. All of our knowledge centers, the specific areas of interest, are under these 5. All of our research is located under these 5. All the conversations that you all are having are under these 5. So it's a graphic we probably should have been using more so in the conference.
Yeah, so number 1, no surprise here, right? Culture's elevated itself at the absolute board level and, of course, at the CEO agenda. And that again, was just even reiterated by Michael. And, one of the things that we just wanted to remind you of is, these are excerpts from the National Association of Corporate Directors. We're just trying to draw them out to really help you really focus in on what matters most. Look at the one on the right-hand side where they're actually predicting and anticipating and saying that they believe it's going to be a major investment criteria from the PE firms, from major shareholders, or whomever's investing in your firms as well. So we believe that foremost for all of you, the greatest opportunity for HR is to ensure that you have the pulse through measuring, monitoring, reporting back. What is the culture of the firm? How's it supportive of where your strategy is at? Where are there pockets that could invoke business or major business risk when you start looking down the horizon as well?
So the second one is understand your talent risk. I mentioned this a little while ago. We have produced an entire report on talent risk, and from that report came up with a 12-point checklist of talent risk. And Kev, I don't think we want to go through each one, but are there a couple that you want to highlight here?
I think if you were to kind of synchronize this and dissect this, you're going to immediately sense and see strategic workforce planning all over it, right? And so this is absolutely critical for organizations to absorb and get their minds wrapped around. You already have that muscle in your organizations, so it's just a great lens to look at this through.
Okay. The third one is one that we've been talking a lot about over the last year or so, and that's expanding your talent ecosystem. And you saw this graphic in Kevin's study, or Kevin's presentation yesterday, around the talent ecosystem integration model. And in fact, what the research team has done is come up with specific case studies under each one of these different areas, which maybe you could talk a little bit about those case studies.
Well, the case studies are from your organizations, and so you can go out there. For instance, John Bedreau alluded to an internal talent marketplace at Disney. They actually call that program GIGS. It started in their consumer products and interactive media division through Gary Randall, who's now heading talent corporately for Disney. And we highlight what they did, what that looks like. And then you can also look at, Michael Killingsworth had a phenomenal presentation getting his next practice award around ABB and their leading at the edge. Well, there's also a really great and innovative program where it's not a talent exchange, but it's really a knowledge exchange where Michael at ABB is taking their top, let's say 3 to 5 executive committee -1 level successors and exposing them, letting them learn with and exposing them to the executive committees or their peers, those same successors at Shell, at Lafarge, at other firms that are like but not directly competitive over in Europe. It's a very innovative model, and we talk about that as an internal or external talent marketplace. So those are just a couple of the examples.
Yeah, great. The next one, we heard a whole presentation on this from Charlotte around employer brand and how that needs to evolve over time and how the talent acquisition function needs to evolve over time. Employer brand and just brands in general can be a little tricky, and I'll just show you a quick graphic here to show you how tricky this can be overall. I'll let you take a moment to look at these pictures. I think the lessons learned here is spelling matters, right? And if you're putting letters on doors, you better know what happens when you open or close those doors. I knew Lucy would love that one, yes. We have another slide here too that I thought was pretty interesting. And if I could ask Matt to just click play on this. This is an interactive graphic of the best global brands ranking for the last 18 years. And I think it's a fascinating graphic to watch just to see how different brands have come into prominence and out of prominence overall. And as I saw this graphic, I was thinking about talent brand. Wouldn't it be interesting to think about talent brand in this same light, and how's talent brand increasing or decreasing over time? But it's kind of fascinating, isn't it, to see the switching of some of the companies, and some companies that aren't even on the list. Like Amazon's not even on the list just yet. Now they just popped on for down at the bottom. Watch this one skyrocket. Pretty cool, isn't it? So you'll all have that if you want to use that for anything in your organizations. But I just really loved that little interactive GIF. Anything else you want to say about talent brand, Kev?
No, I think what was interesting, and this is going to lead us into the next slide. But I remember visiting, or you know what? I'll hold that for a minute. Let me hold my thought. This slide right here comes from our talent acquisition. Number 3 out of a 3-part series report we did on employer brand. And what's interesting here is this gets to how do organizations measure employer brand? And you've got the most popular measures on the left, but the most powerful ones, correlation to market performance, talent acquisition effectiveness, you could see where mentions of the media, social media engagement, source of successful hires, right? employees' ability to communicate the brand to others. All this speaks to where we're going to go next, Kevin, which is around that listening strategy. And what I wanted to reference when Kevin was showing me that graphic, which I thought was super cool, like you did on employer brand, I remember visiting when Kevin Wilde, who's now aiding our research team as a strategic research advisor, when he was head of talent at General Mills, I remember visiting with him, and he showed me from his lobby, we could look into the baking section, and there were television monitors. And you could see the data, numbers popping up, data everywhere. And I remember asking him, what's that data from? And he said, oh, those are the most popular recipes being downloaded from, like Pillsbury.com or from this cookbook that we have, et cetera. And I got thinking, and I was like, how cool is that? Are you doing anything with that with regard to talent, to understand what your employees are saying? And I remember him saying, that's next, that's coming next. But that sets up what Kevin had talked about with talent brand and then this listening strategy here, because what we're talking about here, I think next slide where we have the data, it's, we're seeing these organizations, and especially as the stewards of your organization's culture. Stewards meaning you're measuring, you're monitoring, you're reporting back, and then you're able to come back with remediation strategies, right? With actionable strategies. You've got to have a listening strategy that's looking at internal sentiment, external sentiment, more rigorous, polling and one a day poll of certain employee segments, especially for those that look at quality feedback, like Michael said at MasterCard, to be able to pull back and provide real-time feedback and development opportunities for those individuals.
In fact, we had IBM talk about this at the conference in the past, and they had a story. They do a great job of creating a dashboard of employee data that is changing all the time and has different inputs into it, both from internal systems and external systems. And they told a story of how they had made a policy change, and the policy change was you can't expense Uber rides anymore, and how viral that went on Twitter and other social media outlets by all IBM employees immediately afterwards. And by monitoring that, they realized they made a big mistake. We can't do this. And they reversed their decision within a day, just based on that ongoing listening strategy. So I think this is gaining in popularity. We talked about rapport last year and the importance of natural language processing in being able to evaluate large amounts of data and apply sentiment analysis to that very quickly. So that you can get a sense of what's happening inside the organization. I think as things are changing on a regular basis, and we go back to my comment about the political and unexpected things that happen in society today, seemingly more so than ever before, you want to have a pulse on what the employees are thinking every day and what they're talking about. And I think that plays into the whole culture renovation aspect that we talked about.
It sure does. And I'll go back to a story. Wednesday or whatever, I shared with all of you how I had met with the North American chair, the chair and CEO, and the CFO of this very large company based in Paris when they were in the United States. And I was talking about the importance of a listening strategy because culture transformation is the #1 thing on the CEO's agenda. And I was talking about the importance of a listening strategy. When I said that, the North American chair just jumped in. He said, and he looked at his CEO and he said, hey, Pierre-Andre, do you remember the instance in this plant, in this location, around this? It was a major type of leadership behavior gone wrong. And he said, it was weeks until it got to me. And when it got to me, do you remember how much it cost? And the CFO was just like this. And he said, this type of thing would remediate that risk. He said, we would find out about it early. Maybe not nullify the whole risk, but minimize it in a great way. And he was looking at it from that vantage point, which I thought was great.
Yeah, for sure. All right, the 6th one is embracing automation and upskilling your workforce. And Kev, this is a brand new stat from our latest study, so maybe you want to talk about what we've done with that study.
Yeah, well, yeah, Tom Stone, as you know, of the Major League Baseball Network, part-time employee at I4cp. Tom's leading that great study that we have with, I'm giving him credit, Cheryl. I'm not making fun of him, I'm giving him credit. But Tom's leading a great study with John Bedreau on AI, and we've captured very extensive global data on this. And we're just going through the analysis. Tom's talking to many of your organizations, but clearly, as an entity, we're not ready, right, for what's coming our way. There are some great organizations that are doing some very cool things, and Tom's been very fortunate to have had conversations with them. So we anticipate a lot of very rigorous case examples coming up. But Kevin, if you go to the next slide,
I want to talk about this one for a second.
Yep.
So we had well over 1,000 respondents to the study Kevin's talking about. I find that bottom answer pretty fascinating. When we're asking companies, are you prepared to handle the capability gaps related to work automation, only 12% of top performing organizations said no, but 71% of low performing organizations said no. And to me, that when you get that wide of a gap, that's a very indicative statistic, in my opinion.
You know, this next slide here, and I just, if there's a typo in there, it's because Lori didn't have a chance to review it, and it's my fault. But what I thought was important is this. You know, when you have a good fortune to listen to someone like John Bedreau, personally, I find it challenging to take all the thoughts that John has, which are many and deep, and trying to figure out and triangulate what can we do with those. So John, John came into our Chief HR Officer board meeting on Monday and had a similar but a little different conversation with those Chief HR Officers. But I took to the whiteboard at one moment and I said, John, with what you're talking about, I've got to start crystallizing some takeaways here for the board. And this is literally what I wrote down. I just said, John, let me just make sure that everyone's going to walk away with the same framework. They could take it where they want, but is this fair enough? And John begrudgingly said, yes, that's fair enough. It goes in other areas as well, but I just wanted to share this, and I think it echoes a lot of what we've heard, and it goes back to the talent risk piece that Kevin showed in that 12-step model. Some of these steps are in that model right there, right? And this incorporates what John's talking about of the deconstruction of the roles into work components. But if you start thinking about that, that starts making you say, okay, what do we automate, right? So you start thinking about your upskill, reskill, and what do you need to start advancing your employees and providing training and development on, but it also starts making you think about your talent ecosystem. What do we need to flex? What do we need to build within that ecosystem or maybe get rid of where we could tap into on demand or through other mechanisms the skill set, mindset, capabilities we need when we need it to drive the capacity, the capability, and the agility needed. So that was what this is about.
And speaking of agility, we obviously have done a lot of work around that subject. And our seventh takeaway here or action is find and develop agile leaders. We again created a very nice infographic that we call the Agile Leader Checklist from our 3 A's of Agility study. And Kevin's been a big champion of this, so I'll let you talk about this one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It was very clear to us in our research that agile organizations require agile leaders, and what we found out about those leaders is that they're boundaryless, and they're really boundaryless in 4 major areas. And we've written about that at our website. You can Google or search boundaryless and you'll read about it. But basically what this gets down to, and these are color-coded for a reason, the first 2 talk about qualities in those leaders that enable them to see beyond self and silo, right? They're looking at the system, they think about the system, and both internal and external, their entire ecosystem as a business. The next is about creating inclusive and innovative environments. They go hand in glove, and those 2 speak to that. The next, and this is one thing I think is so critical, is when we're talking agility, there's multiple forms of disruption. What we know from these leaders is they keep their people focused on really the priorities. They never lose sight on that. So it's connecting to both the head and the heart, and certainly that's the purpose, et cetera. And then the last one speaks to that network component that so many had talked to here, the informal networks, the relationships, et cetera, and it's all about being that connector. for people to build and strengthen relationships. Think about it from an onboarding standpoint or from a talent mobility standpoint, or of course from connecting the enterprise, bridging silos, et cetera.
That's great. All right, the 8th one is rethinking how work actually gets done. And you've seen this numerous times already, but just really taking that network approach that Kevin was talking about. I think this is honestly very underutilized in most organizations. We're not really thinking about where communication and collaboration flow is happening. We're not thinking about those Mitchells in the middle. We often will talk about this graph in positive light, saying, okay, Mitchell's indispensable, but he might have overload and be ready to quit the company. But in a more negative light, you could also look at this and say, maybe Mitchell is a bottleneck, and everything is just slowing down because Mitchell's got to be, it's all got to go through Mitchell. When I show this slide, I often will just show the left side first and say, who's in charge? And the answer is clear. It's Morris, or however you pronounce that name. And then when you look at the right-hand side, obviously that's not the case. Obviously that individual is not in charge. So I encourage you to think more about this. Again, the Connected Commons group that we talked about earlier, this is the kind of stuff they're exploring on a regular basis, and there's a lot of tools to help with this exploration. All right, the 9th one is something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, of course, driving a diverse and inclusive work environment. I would have said inclusive and diverse, because that's a cool way to say it now, Kev. But this you
Once
saw...
again, I'm not cool.
No, you're funky.
So I have
That's
to
right,
nickname
you're funky.
myself, right? So,
all
right.
I love this graphic, and really I think Lori was the champion behind this, and this came from a pulse survey that we did a little while ago, but I'll let you speak to it, Kev.
Well, no, I think it's perception difference, right, between men and women, and I feel like I'll just speak personally, right? It's something I try to challenge myself to grow in all the time. I find myself fumbling, sometimes with words that the intent is not there, but the words, matter. I've had someone say to me jokingly, but I know they meant it, like, that's a microaggression. And I remember thinking, I don't know what in the world that is. I don't know what that is. And then I was educated, and I thought for a moment and reflected and said, holy crap, I could see that perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that just that general awareness, right, of what we're seeing, all of this, Kevin, speaks to what several speakers said, which is it's not so much just about the what anymore, it's the what and the how.
Yeah,
and it's the how where I think people get tripped up.
We didn't talk too much about gender pay equity over the last couple days, but we also did a pulse survey specifically on this and produced a pretty nice report and series of graphics that came out of this study. And as part of this, many of you know we run these HR groups called CHO groups in certain cities. So we started doing this in Seattle, we've got Portland, Phoenix, but we have a very large one in New York City that we run. And it's a lot like this forum. We don't have any vendors or consultants there, it's just HR executives, but from that geographic area. And so we did a panel presentation on this issue around gender pay equity, and I thought it was one of the better sessions that we had as part of the New York CHO. Lori moderated the panel, and we had some authors on the panel. We also had some practitioners on the panel talking about what has happened in their organizations or in their experiences when they address gender pay equity. But then the whole audience got into it, and we had one woman stand up and said the name of her company and said, we decided to do a pay audit. We recognized that there were some pretty big discrepancies between men and women and how we were paying them in the organization. And we handed one woman a $300,000 check to address the pay inequity that was happening. And I joked, I said, I hope you did that on her birthday, because that's a pretty nice check to get. But she then made another point. She said, it seems like the right thing to do a pay audit in your organization, but before you do it, really think through what you're going to do if you find inequities in your organization. Because it's not enough to approach a woman and say, you know, we're sorry, you know, we've got to raise your salary because we have not been paying you on an equitable basis. The next question is, well, how long has that been going on, right? And, you know, and suddenly the CFO is looking at liabilities in the organization that maybe didn't think about or prepare for. So you got to really think about what you want to do when you do that pay audit and what the actions are going to be, what the outcomes could be going forward. All right, the last one is our favorite word of this week, renovate. So renovate the culture and renovate HR. And I'll let you take this away.
Well, I mean, this one right here just speaks to something we had brought up the other day. You all have told us that the HRBP is, if not one of the most significant roles within HR for the organization going forward. And so there's a slew of resources available at i4cp.com under the strategy domain and strategic HR, knowledge center, that are available around here. And then, of course, we've got a full-blown assessment as well, but just wanted to hit upon that. And then this one right here was, you know, I think so important. You know, if you think about, you know, the way to read this, 81% of the organizations that said their culture transformation was highly or very highly successful they had defined and put in place a change model up front, right? And then you could see where part of that change model or is certainly letting go of leaders that aren't demonstrating the how or don't have the mindset or willingness to get there, but where the performance, the onboarding, the talent acquisition function, rewards, succession planning, we found that, speaking of the how, you know, one of the key factors in there were organizations at really successful transformations where they made sure that those that were getting elevated in the succession pipeline were those that were demonstrating the how versus those that weren't. So it's not just the top performers around the what.
So obviously that's a lot of that's in the culture renovation report, so take a look at that. Let's take questions now, but first we just want to say thank you to all of you. I know that, you know, sometimes there's a lot of information. I had one individual say to me yesterday, I want to just pause the conference for half a day just to kind of process everything I heard and write it all down. So we know it's a lot of information to process, but you in this room are the troopers who have done a great job at being able to process that information. We also will get that link out to you for the survey. And the last housekeeping thing I want to mention is we'll be right back here next year, March 23rd through 26th of the dates. So hopefully it'll be a little sunnier next year for the 2020 conference. But hopefully we'll see you next year at the conference. So let me just see does anybody have any questions, or we'll take comments and rude remarks as well. So if you do, please stand up to the mic.
Hello, Colleen Doyland from Alberta, Calgary, Alberta Electric System Operator. We operate a grid and system. And this is all about all of you. This network is really powerful. This is my second time attending. And I just wanted to thank i4cp. We'll be a member soon. You got us. But I just want to thank all of you as well, because the conversations we've had on the floor have been powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's probably the perfect comment to end on. So I want to thank all of you. Thank you for the interaction. I thought the peer interaction was fantastic over the last couple days. I got many, many people's comments around the speakers. I thought the speakers were just phenomenal. And I want to have one last round of applause for all the great speakers that you saw. Okay. Oh, it's not up there now. We will see you back here 2020 in just a little over a year. So hopefully we'll see all of you at the conference then. Have a safe journey home. I know there's some flight issues, and hopefully you all can get home on time and safely. Thank you.